nationality, all those things that make up who you are. And so we want to make sure that people are able to affirm that, feel good about their identities, and understand what all that means. Building community, so building a community of students who are supportive of each other, understand each other, listen and respect each other. Inclusive leadership, so building and teaching leadership that is inclusive of all the groups on campus, and involves students in a way that empowers them and brings them together for a common goal. So those are Student Activities Office core values or core concepts around diversity. Some of Dr. Cullen's core concepts that she talks about in the book. Intent versus impact, and this is where the phrase well-intended comes from. So when you say something to someone, you have a certain intent behind it. It means something to you and how you're saying it. When people hear that, they might interpret it in a different way, different from what you mean to say. And so your intent is different from the impact it has on someone else.
Yeah.
And so that's the big gap here we're talking about is, when you say something with good intent, it may have a negative impact. And so how do we negotiate that, and how do we figure out how to best, move forward from those and learn from those experiences? The pile-on principle. You never know what kind of day someone is having. They could be having a really terrible day. Oh yeah. Yeah.
This is my extra paper for you. Let's see. There we go.
So the pile-on principle, someone could be having a really bad day. So if you say something negative to them, it could just make their day worse. So it's the pile-on principle.
But I think the Westerner may, maybe have little effect on that.
Yeah. The interpersonal relationships between Western, especially Westerns, is very, very different dynamic.
Yeah, it makes straight.
Yeah. Explain aways. So, if you offend someone, you try to defend yourself and explain what you said away. And rather than just listening to what the person who's offended has to say and why they were offended, and trying to learn from that experience and move forward. Advantage and disadvantage groups and privilege. There are certain amounts of privilege that we all have, and then there are privileges that we don't have. So certain groups in society are advantaged in these ways, and they have privilege. Certain groups are not advantaged so much.
What do you mean by that?
So if we look at race as an example, an overarching example, in the history of particularly the United States, white people have a privilege.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so there's a certain, you have to recognize this privilege that.
Yeah, that's why I don't know about that.
Yeah. No, well, so in another way, only so many people are able to go into higher education and get a college education. That is a privilege. The vast majority of the world's population is not able to go to college. So just us being here is a privilege. And so that is an advantage we have as a community, because we're able to experience college and higher education when the majority of the world is not able to.
I have a question. And are there many Americans choose not to go to college?
There are some Americans who do not choose to go to college. There are other factors like economic abilities. Some people just aren't able to pay for it. Family commitments, and then there are some folks who go into different trades and fields that don't require a college degree, and so I think we talk about aspiring to go to college and everyone wants to go, but it's not always for everyone.
Wait a minute, I'm checking out the world. Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
Never mind.
If you have it later on, let me know. The concept of allies. So even though you may not be a part of a certain community, being an ally for that community.
Ally?
Ally. If you don't personally identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender, you can still be an ally to that community and
How do you spell ally?
ALLY, or
Okay.
allies, large group of allies. And so it's acting on behalf and for a group that you may not be a part of, but you still support their well-being, and you want to make sure that they have what they need.
Okay.
So when someone says something that offends us, Dr. Cullen talks about responding in a certain way. So you've been offended by a statement. You want to breathe, take a deep breath, kind of let that stress go for a second, acknowledge what was said, kind of gather your thoughts, and then respond. So you have a well thought out response. You know what you're going to say in response to someone who just said something pretty offensive to you, rather than our first reaction of react, attack that person for offending us, and then afterwards thinking about what we just did.
But do you think only breath will work?
It helps kind of just calm you down, and it gives you a second to think. And that's the thing, is you want to try and enter these instances where an offending statement has been made, not to make the situation worse. You want to move towards a more positive situation where you both can work together to figure out what happened. And if you react instantly and attack the person for offending you, you won't be able to move to that positive space. So if you take it a second, kind of breathe, gather your thoughts, and then kind of lay it out to them. This is what you said. This is why it offended me. You might be a little bit better suited to get to a positive place with that person.
Yeah. It's well, I have a little problem with that.
Okay.
Because when friends angry or what, maybe I believe some electrical things here, and it takes like 5 or 10 minutes to come down.
And that might be what it needs to be, and when you come back to that conversation, you're going to be able to approach that person in a better way than going right back at them and potentially saying something just as or more offensive to them. Because if you keep going back and forth with this person in an attacking manner, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're not going to be able to move forward together in a positive manner. And the quote she uses from Sir Edmund Burke on bystander behavior: "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." So if you see an injustice and you feel uncomfortable with it, speaking up and saying something about it and trying to support someone who is being treated wrongly that evening. So, all right. So here's a few of the seven things that I picked out that dumb things that well-intended people say. So some of my best friends are black. Some of my best friends are gay. So we say that in response of if there's a situation where we're expected to know about that community, or we want to show that we understand that community, we'll say some of our best friends are black or are gay.
I don't know if I'm being respect. I'm totally okay with that. Can we just skip to next chapter? First one.
What do you?
I mean, the first one I'm totally okay with. No matter what the experience is, what if the experience anything.
Well, so and the intent there, so when you say that, your intent is you want to build comfort, and you want the person to understand that you're okay and that you are comfortable with that, and that's great, and that's the good intent. The impact of that statement, if someone says, some of my best friends are black, trying to offer that comfort level, you're assuming that your friend's experience is the same as this other person's. When everyone has different life experiences, different approaches to things, and a different feel for their own identities. So if you're pulling in your friend who is black to, say that you're comfortable with black people to another black person, you're assuming that their life experiences have been the same because they're black. So that's the potential impact of that statement that this other person can feel. And so, you want to speak of your friends as it's appropriate, not to gain credibility. So, rather than, oh, my black friend, oh, my friend Bob, who also likes, this certain type of food. So bring them in, as an individual, not as a member of a community or a race, So not as your black friend, but as your friend Bob. So you're pulling from their individual life experiences rather than as, bringing them in as the whole community. So this has been a lot of for especially American mainstream culture, statements of "that's so gay," "that's so retarded," "that's so lame," and often we say it when something isn't working. So a lot of people will say it, like if something doesn't work. They'll say, "Oh, this, so the printer didn't print out your project correctly." Someone will say, "Oh, this printer is so gay." That's because gay has been moved into this language that it can be used that way, rather than when it's really meant to describe a community of people.
What does it mean when people say that's so gay?
So nowadays, when something doesn't work or something, we think something is stupid, we use that phrase. Just it's become so ingrained in our culture, and so you're basically comparing a social identity or a mental condition or a medical condition to something that is stupid or doesn't work, and so you're really comparing a person and a community to something that you don't find valuable, and it's it can potentially be demeaning to that person. Let me see if the sound works, because this is a commercial.
Check out this shit, right? Right? That's so gay. That's really gay. Look at those hands.
Please don't say that.
What?
Don't say that something is gay when you mean that something is dumb or stupid. It's insulting. It's like if I thought this pepper shaker was stupid and I said, "Man, this pepper shaker is so 16-year-old boy with a cheesy mustache." Just saying. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
So if, instead of "that's so gay," if the phrase was "that's so guy wearing a blue shirt," that could be potentially offensive to me. And so, you don't want to identify someone's identity with something that's stupid or doesn't work.
What about when people say he looks like a gay?
You don't want to assume for people. You want people
I see many U.S. movies say something like that.
Pop culture is a very different. Pop culture doesn't represent a daily, a you and I conversation.
Okay.
Pop culture kind of glamorizes things. It exaggerates things. It's you want to. That is a part of someone's identity. You want to give them a chance to explain it, to give them a chance to own it, and be proud of it. You don't want to force that on them. So.
You mean when a man wears something like pussy, other people in the real socialization life don't think this guy may be okay?
People do, and but
just don't speak out.
Well, and so we all have these ways. When we talk about stereotyping.
Stereotyping.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's our first assumption. So if a guy is wearing really flamboyant or really colorful clothing, that we assume it makes us assume they're gay. That's a stereotype, and we don't know if they are. We also don't know if the guy wearing a business suit could be gay too, just because he's not wearing the crazy clothing. And so, with stereotyping, yes, it happens, and we all do it. It's the natural process that our brain uses to categorize people. It's how you act on it, on that assumption that your brain's making. You know, if you go up to them and you say, "Oh, you look so gay," or "You gay man," like that's not appropriate. You know, it's
of course.
you know, you want to give that person to be themselves. The respect, you know, in peer-to-peer relationships is letting people kind of define themselves and, you know, accepting them for how they define themselves and not putting that on them without their consent.
Yeah, I guess
Cool.
big difference
Yeah.
between US and from here.
Yeah.
Is that US people usually support people to be themselves, and for example, as you can do anything you want. I don't care what others think.
You know, it's always tough. People still, you know, there's a lot of discrimination.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People will always judge,
Okay.
and that's just something. But you know, when we talk about building community and building, you know, inclusive leaders, we want to give people the opportunity to be themselves, and not forcing our beliefs on them. You know, we can have these disagreements, we can have these feelings, but we want to be able to give everybody the opportunity to achieve something. So, this gets, you know, this one, it was only a joke, don't take things so seriously. So if you say something to someone that offends them, and you see they're offended, and you're like, automatically, you go on the defensive, and you're like, you know, it was only a joke, you know, don't take it so seriously.
Hey, just be cool.
Yeah. So it's, you know, your intent is you want to kind of cool the hot air. You want to make sure that, you know, they're okay, that, you know, you didn't mean it. And it's just, you want to ease that tense situation. The impact that you're telling this person that's now offended is, you know, your opinion on what I just said to you doesn't matter. You know, let's move past it. But so I'm not going to listen to why you were offended and, you know, try and understand what I said that hurt you, because really you hurt them in an emotional way. And so saying, you know, it was just a joke, don't take it so seriously, let's move on. You know, they could feel like their opinion doesn't matter. So it's kind of an interesting video that kind of breaks down, the variety of circumstances and variety of communities that we have, around the world. When we think about the privilege we have here at, just at MIT, the amazing technological resources we have, when only 8% of the world's population has an internet connection, or easy access to it, and we have it. We take it for granted with Wi-Fi. I'm using that right now, and we take it for granted. And so, how are we understanding our role in the world, and what kind of privilege we have based on our different communities we belong to, different life experiences, life circumstances. So,
How many people in the whole world?
Over 6 billion. Yeah. So, and when you talk about
In China, they were approaching 5% have internet.
Mm.
No, I mean 5% of 6 billion.
Hmm?
Just a little down of
Okay.
the number. Never mind.
Oh, gotcha. So the last one, why do they always have to sit together? They are always sticking together. So the example I use for this is at an old school I used to work at, very much smaller school than MIT, a rural school. So we only had one dining hall on campus where students could get dinner at. And based on the tables you sat at in the dining hall, they had different names. There was the African students table. All the African students sat there. There was the black kids table. There was the gay table. And so there's this concept of why are they always sitting together? Why don't they come and hang out with us?
Yeah.
And so, it can feel as though they are part of some exclusive group that only they belong to, and why can't I be part of that group? And the impact of that statement is, that they often refers to a minority group, and whereas we rarely accuse the majority of this clumping together or sitting together. You don't walk into the dining hall and rather than saying why are all the black kids sitting together at the cafeteria table, you don't say why are all the white kids sitting together at all these different tables. You always, when you hear this statement, it's typically about a minority community, a community that's disadvantaged in some way. And so, and the concept here is that we all clump together. It's a comfort mechanism. We like to be with people that are similar to us because we have those close, similar bonds that we can connect with, and we have that trust built up because of those similarities. And so it's natural for groups to kind of clump together around those similarities. I could clump with an athletic group. I could clump with the white group. I could clump with the group that loves to be on Twitter all day. Yeah. And so, we have these different abilities to clump with different groups. We have the different interests, different aspects of our identity that define us and that we identify with. So if you were to go to a conference, your comfort level would probably be with some other MIT folks who came with you. You want to kind of hang out with them. That's where your comfort zone is, because you know them, you're comfortable with them, you have common experiences. And so really, trying to bring people down for, excluding themselves, it's really just a defense mechanism, and it's a comfort thing. It makes us feel a little more comfortable.